Welcome to Messy Christian Mamas. We are three Christian moms with a progressive mindset and loving hearts and minds. We are imperfect humans, but we're all loved in God's sight. At some point, we've all felt like the church and Christianity may not have been for us, but God isn't looking for perfection. He's just looking for you.
We are not experts in Christian theology, and we do not represent any particular Christian faith or church. We are simply here to be authentic, and we hope you join us on this journey.
Hello, and welcome back to Messy Christian Mamas. We're so glad that you're here. This is Kendra.
This is Kaylee.
And this is Ashley.
And we have a very special episode for you today. We will have a guest joining us, but sometimes people are pulled in a lot of directions, and she is not able to be here at the beginning of the episode, but she will join us once we are in session on this episode. So our topic today, we're talking about marriage. So our guest today is going to be Pastor Carla Nobler, and she was the interim pastor here at the church that we all attend. And she is no longer the interim pastor, but while she was, she gave this phenomenal sermon on divorce several months back, and she has this really fresh and unique perspective on it. And we discussed with her coming on the podcast to talk about her perspective on divorce, and she said to talk about divorce, we have to start with marriage. So here we are, and that's why we're talking about marriage. So if you want to hear about divorce, listen next week. That's next week's episode. But this week we're going to talk about step one first. So let's see. What is marriage? What is marriage?
Well, I was going to say, too, before, it's interesting we have these three different perspectives, because we've got Kendra, married, stayed married, Kaylee, not
single,
not
never married,
and me married and divorced. So we have, all three perspectives.
Yeah, well, and also, I'm a second wife.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so just throwing that out there, too. So I think it's pretty well established on this podcast that we believe marriage is an institution between two consenting adults,
yes,
regardless of gender. So just to put that on the table first, that's our baseline. So given all of that, what is marriage to you?
I just think of that scene from The Princess Bride when the priest is at the very beginning and it was like marriage is what brings us together.
Maybe that's
today.
The episode name. Marriage.
I can't take it serious. I can't take it seriously because it's just gonna be in my head now.
Right. It's kind of hard for me to separate what is just marriage and what is a good marriage.
Sure.
Because to me, I immediately just try to start qualifying a good marriage. And to me, that's a partnership, an equal partnership with reciprocity. And that is very hard to come by these days.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
That was a fancy word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to repeat it, but it was a fancy word.
Ashley has a very good education.
My mom was an English teacher. We had a vocabulary word of the week every week on
that
the calendar.
Amazing.
Yeah. They have this story that my uncle, I was 5, and he came over to the house, and I was like, ooh, phenomenal. And I was 5. And my uncle was like, did you just say phenomenal?
That word just contains a lot of letters that my tongue doesn't like to say. So I'm not going to even try it.
Kaylee, you want to go?
I think pretty much the same thing. A partnership, I don't know, equal to me because I'm looking at my parents' marriage, which is an amazing partnership, but it's not necessarily equal on every single scope because my mom doesn't work, and my dad does. My mom, basically was a stay-at-home mom. She ran a home daycare, but my dad worked outside of the home. So, they weren't equal, they weren't equal in terms of, financial things, and, dad very much was, if we got in trouble, it was, you wait till your dad gets home, because, we're going to tell you. So, I was raised very much, but equal in the fact that, they don't make big decisions without each other, really kind of buying. Both of them have to buy in, and they're each other's best friend, and I think that's what I think good marriages like that's important, that there's a
Friendship.
friendship
Yeah.
there outside, because I think you have to be able to laugh with each other, because there's so much pressure that husband and wives have on them, that you have to have a sense of humor. And I think friendship is just
Trust.
very, very important. So just a partnership between like two friends that know each other inside out and are there to pick up the slack from each other. Brene Brown has a great thing where it's like everything has to equal 100, but there are be days where I'm at a 20, so he has to be at an 80.
I like that.
It's
I
like
think that's
not
fair.
everyone's going to be at 100%.
And that any relationship, I feel that way, that you play to your strengths. But I think where I'm coming from with that angle is like power imbalances can happen.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, I like that description of that it equals 100 eventually.
Well, our special guest has joined us. Say hello to Pastor Carla Nobler. We're so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you. Atlanta traffic is horrendous.
It really is.
Welcome to Atlanta.
Fortunately, arrived here in I think 64, 65. So yeah, I have a little bit of history.
When did the traffic get bad?
66.
Sounds good to me.
So we are just talking, Pastor Carla, we're talking about what marriage is to all of us. So we let everybody know that's listening that you had this fantastic sermon on divorce several months back. And when we talked to you about coming on the podcast, you said, well, we have to start with marriage to talk about divorce. So here we are. We're talking about marriage first. And Ashley and Kaylee have talked to us a little bit about what their thoughts are on marriage. And just to give a little bit on mine, and then we'll pass it to you so you have a minute to collect your thoughts before we throw you into the hot seat.
You're terrific.
So for me, it goes beyond just commitment. For me, it really is a covenant with God. And every person's response to this question will probably be different. But it's a covenant with God to commit to this other person. And something that, as I was thinking about this question, something that came to me was, over the years I've been asked this one question a lot of times, usually when a friend is contemplating marriage, their own desires to get married or their partner's desires to get married, they would ask, did you feel different after you got married? I've gotten that question a lot of times, and each person will probably feel differently about this too, but for me the answer was really yes. I didn't have a lot of stability in my childhood and was always looking for it. Before Brad, I had 2 other serious long-term relationships, but when I met him, I knew within days that he was the one. He was the one for me, and that it was endgame. We clicked, and we found our way to intimacy so quickly, and I don't mean physical intimacy, but just emotional intimacy. We just clicked into each other very quickly. He was a very young single dad, and I had a lot of baggage from my childhood that we've talked about on the podcast. And we both were able to see through all of that to the person inside that trauma wrapper. And yeah, well, right? Had to peel all of it away to get to the inside. And
bubble wrap.
Right? Pop all of the little bubbles
Small
on the
little
outside.
explosions that are happening as you unpeel.
So having that commitment and that covenant meant something to me, and it really almost felt like tangible to me in some way. I always say that my marriage is the thing that I'm most proud of, and it's because it requires so much work to keep it in a healthy place, and it's not always easy. The valleys are real and they're hard. We've been blessed that we haven't faced anything in our, what is it, 20, what is this year? It was 24, so 23 years of marriage, that we haven't faced anything that's made us want to divorce. But did it feel different? 100%. It felt different for me when I got married. I felt like a new woman after I said I do. So anyway, that's a lot of information, but that's how I feel about marriage. Pastor Carla, what is marriage to you? Now you're in the hot seat.
Well, no, I'm just trying. I'm trying to figure out how far back I want to go. I think I want to go back to the premise of my perspective about my faith,
Yeah.
and where that is, and go forward from there. And I'm one who was really challenged by this church, this Bible thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I came home. My parents came home to the hospital, from the hospital to a basement in a Lutheran church.
Wow.
They opened up the door. The pastor happened to be there that day and opened the door and said, "You are having that child baptized." My mom went, yeah. And I later learned that my brothers were baptized 6 and 7 years after I was born, so they were much older than I.
Well,
So that was interesting. So I've had this faith thing a long time. I've had this journey. Stuff like that goes on with me and my relationship with God. And so one thing catastrophic happened in my life when I was a child, and that drove me even closer to kind of discovering what God was. And I look at other things, and I look at other people, and I could see, sometimes God just sticks to the wall like a spitball in people's lives. And so from that came a challenge. I wanted to undress this faith God thing down to the end. My Bible 101 teacher was quite a character. She came in, and you've probably heard other situations where a biblical professor took the Bible and threw it on the ground and stood on it. And you'd hear this is at Agnes Scott, and you heard everybody, and this is cool. Yeah. So I wanted to, my thing is I want to undress everything and get it to its bare bones, beyond flesh and sinew and all that, and just get this relationship with God and how God interacts with each situation. So when it comes to marriage, it was really cool when I learned that in the eyes of God, when one pledges fidelity to another, you're married. That's it. That's the end of it. And that's about as naked as you can get. Mm-hmm. And anything beyond that comes all that conversation when they do talk about, when the Bible talks about God, divorce and all that stuff. So, intrigued by my 3 failures in marriage.
Save the divorce for the next episode.
I'm going to say it. No. Save that. No, you're not going to hear about it. Save that, and that those weren't great things. Each one of them was revealing. Yeah. And I learned a lot in marriage. I blew it each time for different reasons. And I think what a lot of women do is, I don't think I'm unique. I had 3 great potentials. Mm. There was something about that man in my life, and he's okay, but together I can make him a lot better. Mm-hmm. So
every woman loves a project.
Isn't that right, Kaylee?
Love a project.
Yes, and so all 3 of them were projects for different reasons. And the first one is he was very good in math. And I said, this is cool. Okay, we can do something with that. And then the second one wasn't my choice at all. Happened to be my father's choice, because his father was a superior court judge. And Dad said, "We're moving up in the world. This is really cool." He might have been the worst. And the third one was a roofer.
My dad was a roofer.
Yeah. This guy could actually complete a roof. He did for the wealthiest people up in Tennessee. And he could actually roof a house in one day and walk out with $2,000 in his pocket. Oh, this is cool. All right, we're going somewhere here. And what I didn't pay attention to is he could also spend it at the nightclub that same night.
Oh, no.
He'd buy everybody rounds, and they loved him. And, just because they knew if Joe did a roof, we don't have to buy our own drinks. And it was, terrible, terrible stuff. So,
yeah.
that took me deeper into marriage thing, and I went with each one you can't remake. And that project thing, you better find something you're going to share in. And that takes us to marriage and the quality. So I've done a lot of premarital counseling.
Yeah.
And that's really vital, critical, important. You can blow it off all you want to. And I think the statistics of those who've been through quality, character building, mutual searching in their relationship and the eye-opener are still together. In fact, I came across a couple that I'd officiated, whose marriage I'd officiated 30 some odd years ago, and on Facebook. So I sought them out and I said, so how did that go? And they said, we're great. We have 2 children and we've navigated and we're really happy with life. And I thought, okay. It turns out that everybody that I was blessed to work with and agreed to officiate their service 30 some odd years, and they're all still together.
That's fantastic.
That's great. Yeah, nothing for me. I can't take any credit. Go ahead.
Time out.
When you're in seminary, one of the first things they do with you is they put you through this teaching parish. You spend, and I don't know how it is now, but you spend a year in a congregation just being a little, going around following stuff, and you have the senior pastor kind of is your guide and comes up with this is how we do this, and this is how you do that, and go try it yourself and stuff. And so one of my mentors is Pastor Hako von Hake from the side. That was my assignment, my teaching parish assignment. And he said, well, you meet 6 times, minimum 4 times. And so in those 6 times, those 4 times, whichever, you have 4 themes. One is family, and the things that couples never knew about the other, and the expectations come out at that time. So, well, when we have our 3 kids, and the guy, our what? And just all these revelations, and it's really fun to watch them. And then the next one is the family goes a little deeper. It goes to in-laws and how that's going to work, and how does that interact with your relationship, because somehow, by and large, the guys think their parents, their mother, is wonderful.
They do, yeah.
Yeah. There's some that say no, but pretty much they're going to expect her to do like mom did. And you have this rude awakening of, no, she's an individual. And so how are you going to deal with her as an individual? And being really gutsy and open about that with these people, regardless of their age and their experiences, and how many times they've already been married. We still go through this. The other one is the future, and then one is finance. And finance, it always seems to be a real eye-opener. Like, you have how much debt? And you want what? And your expectations. So marriage is critical. I think the pre-marriage is critical, going through that. And my experience is that when you have that together, I'm glad that you and Brad had that click.
Yeah, we did not have the pre-marriage counseling, but I wish we would have. It would have saved us a lot of heartache over the years.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because no, it doesn't save you any heartache.
It doesn't, right? We're like, Did you have the pre-marriage counseling?
We did have pre-marriage counseling,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
No, I think you and I have talked about that very much.
We did it. We read a book, and it's the only book I've ever thrown away. Halfway through it, I had a garbage can, threw it in the garbage can.
No. Well, I've never done give you a book and things like that. You have to interact.
Yeah.
And you have to ask each other or hear each other asking the hard questions. And no, it wouldn't have prevented anything. What I learned to do from being married 3 times and the dressing down of what marriage is and the dirty stuff of all that, cleaning his underwear or stuff like that, I mean, it gets down dirty stuff, physically or whatever,
Yeah.
is all premarital counseling will do is give you the tools to navigate through it.
Sure.
Equip you to when times get hard. There's definite times that are really hard in marriage. One is the right in the beginning, getting together with each other. That's a difficult time and can really say, oh well, I didn't mean to get into all this, and out they go. The other one is at 2 years. Another divorce spot. Well, this used to be 5 years. And then 7 years is sheer hell on a couple.
Yeah. 7 years is hard.
7 year
I remember 7 years.
Yeah.
There's a whole
It's
movie
tough.
about it.
Yes, there is a whole movie about
Marilyn
it. That's
Monroe
right.
is in it.
And if you can navigate the first 9-10 months and then make it through the 2nd year and make it through the 5th year and struggle through the 7th, you're often good to go.
Yeah.
That's why when people say, I've been married 25 years, what happened? You just why are you getting divorced? What did you lose? What got lost in all that?
Or what did you gain? I don't know. I think like some people finally do the work later in life on themselves.
And then realize that they were in something that
Didn't serve
them.
well.
You're recalling for me, and in fact, it's 2 pastors, and one of the pastors decided, several kids later, ooh, I don't like this, and walked out, and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
How did you play this game for so many years, and then what happened? And I believe not only in premarital counseling, but I'm a big proponent of counseling. I'm sorry.
Yeah, agreed.
And not being counseled, but being present with a third party that calls each person into accountability of what's going on here. And when you get to those points, my first question begins, do you love that person, and do you love that person? And if you say, I'm not sure, or no, I say, bye. That's the end. I can't, nobody can do anything for you. It's going to be heart-rending. And if you are not in love and don't want to work on this, you're not going to do anything for it. So the marriage has to be one of realizing that this other person right now is not as incredible as you really think they are, and this person doesn't know that you're not as incredible as you think you are either. So, and communicating with that, having the tools on what do you do when it gets down and dirty,
Yeah.
and how do you stick it out and respect the other.
Yeah.
I
think some years that's what it is, right? Sometimes it's just, I don't know, in my marriage at least, it has been, I'm just sticking this out right now because it's not in a great place, but I know that this is a valley and I'll find my way through it. And we always have. But sometimes it can be challenging where you just feel like you're walking through mud,
I do have to interject about the counseling, though. There are some situations where counseling can be used as a weapon. Sometimes I think people can come into counseling not with good intentions and use it to hurt the other person. and maybe in a manipulative sort of way. So I do think that if you have tried marriage counseling and it's still not working and things are just great for one person, horrible for the other person, I think individual counseling is a good way to go at that point. And then if you can come back together, but sometimes there are some situations where counseling is not always the best option, I don't think.
I can see how that could be manipulative in the context of saying, oh, well, I'm going to give it a try, but you're saying that with your lips and not with your heart and your your willingness to work at it.
Or sometimes people can say the right thing in counseling and then go home and say something completely opposite, or even on the car ride home, be very angry about what happened in counseling.
So
right.
So I had I had a couple years ago, and he knew all the trigger words to say to seem like, oh, what a guy. Nuh-uh. And the guy, the male was holding it over the woman, and that's exactly what was going on the way home.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have a counselor that's capable of seeing through that and listening.
Or you yourself have to have the bravery and the courage to see what's happening too. I think that, like, if you're going to counseling, you're trying everything you can to save the marriage and everything. We're getting a divorce.
Putting your authentic self in the counseling sessions.
Right. Like, you have to have the courage to see this counselor doesn't get it. They're not going to get it. I need to go to a counselor on my own.
Oh, I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
And you may find out that maybe this wasn't the path you went down, or to go down.
No.
We've talked about therapy shopping before, though. Like, I mean, there's, like, I think a lot of people think that if you go to a therapist, like, you have to go to that therapist. That is not the case at all. Like, a therapist is a relationship. Like, they're going to get to know your deepest, darkest secrets. So you're allowed to shop around to find a counselor or therapist that you feel comfortable with. Yeah, like, if you're sitting in a room and you're afraid that this person is going to take your vulnerabilities and help someone else use them against you, then that's a toxic relationship. So you have every right to then walk out of that session being like, okay, well, on to the next.
And you have to give yourself permission to do that.
I wish people realize that they're allowed to do that. Like,
it can feel daunting though too to do that at times, because you feel like, oh no, I've put this work in and I've unburdened myself of all of this background, and then I'm going to have to start over with somebody new again and do all of this work all over again. But it's so worth it to find somebody that you can really trust in that relationship.
You can just do what Nikki does. So my best friend Nikki, I love her so much, and she's hilarious. So she has decided to go back on the dating apps, and I feel like this would work for a therapist as well. So once she has decided that a guy,
clients,
like, yes, no, so like you're talking about, like, you've already unburdened yourself once, so you don't want to go through that again. So Nikki has started doing this thing where, like, when the guys get off the dating app, and she gives them her personal number, so they've made it from the app to her personal phone number. She has created a note that she sends them with all of her bullet points, like all of her talking points. Like, so basically her history, what she's looking for, her hobbies, what's her favorite color. So she doesn't have to go through all of that small talk, like, over and over and over again. So I feel like that's what I would do if I was shopping for a therapist. I would do a Cliff's Notes version. Here is childhood trauma. Here's adult trauma. This is what I'm looking for. This is what makes me feel safe. These are my trigger words. Here you go. Can you deal with that? No? Okay, next therapist. It'd be like speed dating for therapists.
Or how desperate the therapist is that they say, oh, yeah. You get in there, and like you're talking about, you unfold, you regurgitate everything, and they say, oh, go right. I mean,
but I do think, of course, like, counseling is a good first step. That's the first thing you should try, of course, to get through problems.
Yeah.
But just sometimes
you're talking about pre-counseling?
Pre-counseling and counseling once you're in the marriage, too. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you run into right now, what I'm observing, as I listen to Pastor Fritz, is talking about, well, when we were talking, I said, well, I can do premarital. He says, sorry. Yeah, I see. He said, everything is now, and there's a name for it. He says, nobody gets married in the church. He says, everybody
interesting.
Site wedding, site marriage, a venue.
Oh,
marriage.
Okay.
And he says, nah, you're not going to see that anymore. He says, what you're talking about doesn't exist anymore. And that is tragic.
That is interesting.
Let's compare lasting marriages to our era.
It
to now.
probably also works along with the curve of how people have stopped going to church. I would imagine we don't see as many people attending church anymore either, so people aren't getting married in the church. Not as many would make sense.
Oh no, because you can go get a friend of mine, was pastor, died last year, but her deal was she got so irritated because you can go on Google and get your own certificate of ordination.
Oh yeah, Brad got it to marry his brother.
It's a joke.
Yeah. Unitarian Universalist Church.
Well, I don't know. Phyllis went on and got one for her cat.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Just to point
Mazel tov.
just to point out how ridiculous
That is so funny.
this is.
So a cat. Yeah.
Yep. That was her idea of this is how stupid this is, and let me show you.
Yeah. Did the cat ever marry anyone?
Nope.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, she never did anything with it. She did frame it. I'm sorry. She did frame it and put it on the wall.
That's really funny.
To say this is stupid, and that was her way of making a mockery of what has happened to the sanctity of marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks a lot different, right?
It does. I mean, a relationship of any kind is so difficult. And when you've grown up with, you talked about childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what your background
Childhood
was.
sexual abuse I experienced a lot of in my childhood, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. And you got somebody that hasn't got a clue what you're talking about.
Right.
And not a clue about how you're going to react. And I appreciate that you didn't have the premarital counseling, and I commend you for how y'all stick it out and put it together and give each other a chance. And I guess
sometimes I think it's that we're both really stubborn. We out-stubborn each other.
Stubborn in
sometimes.
that I don't ever want to do this again, or
No, stubborn in that, well, I'm just going to stay here then. And we somehow just ride the wave of the valley sometimes until we get to the, until we're able to work through it.
well, good for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just, usually for us it's always been our own stuff that's going on that's
Right.
causing.
I feel like life, no matter what,
Disruptions
whether
in
married,
marriage.
divorced, whatever, there's always going to be troubles.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a struggle.
Yeah, and
And good times.
absolutely.
Peaks and
I
valleys.
think that's interesting that you mentioned the first year 2, year 5, year 7. I wonder what that relationship with yourself looks like and where those
Isn't that
same,
right?
Yeah.
right? Those same intervals would be.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
And what have you set up? And that's part of the premarital thing is what have your expectations been on this Prince Charming or for this princess that you're marrying, and what ideations have you placed on the other individuals that you think is how this is going to be, and how many people go into marriage thinking that this wonderful pie in the sky is going to happen, and never discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I definitely had my head in the clouds, and I thought Brad was my Prince Charming for a lot of years, and then that whole thing cracked, and it was probably around year 7. Funny enough, and it's a wonderful thing that it happened because it's not realistic, and I don't think you really can go the distance when you're looking at it through that perspective. But it's so much richer.
Yeah, if you make
On
it
the
through
other
it,
side of
yeah,
it?
it
Yeah.
is. All the always are richer if you want to commit and dedicate, and you understand that marriage, and that's why I go back to breaking it down to once you've pledged fidelity, then the eyes of your soul through which you see and respect and regard this other person is complete. You know, you look at other traditions and how they regard marriage, the different sects of the Hebrews, the Muslims, and some of them get it. There are some Muslim men who their wife is chattel, and some of them also get when it says biblically to them that she is your responsibility and she is your crown, and that's the one you protect, and they're vulnerable and you watch over. And some Muslim men do a phenomenal job of that, and the wife wants for nothing. And you know, some of us on this side, on this continent, would kind of like, you let him do what for you, and you're not allowed to do what? What do you mean you're not allowed to?
Yeah.
They don't choose to. It's just incredible, and you can't just take one. I would love to sit down with a Muslim couple. Or, of course, the parents of either wouldn't like it.
Probably not.
Because we've already made this decision. There's nothing for you to do. And then you listen to, have you ever listened to this show where this matchmaker for the Hindi matchmaker?
Oh, I haven't watched it, but I know what you're talking about on Netflix.
It's old. I don't know where it is, but yeah, it's old. It's been around a while. But, you know, what they're looking for, and I don't think she does a very good job of helping them realize what a relationship is. And the bottom line of a marriage is respecting one another.
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago we were someplace, and a couple of girls were talking, and they go, I don't know how the conversation came up, and they said, so how long have you two been together? And I said, 30 years. They go, and I think she was maybe 18 to 21, and she walked away, and she came back, and she said, how'd you do that?
It's a long time.
And she
Should
said,
be proud of that.
Yeah.
and so she said, I said, do what? How did y'all make it 30 years? And I said, mutual respect. And mutual respect means giving the other person space to be, sometimes. And to let them have that and give them the time, and then hope they come and let you talk about it.
Yeah.
And being open about that, and being vulnerable.
I
But
do
it's like-
love seeing those like really long distance relationships, long term, like Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. It's just so, it's like magical, you know, staying together for so long.
Yeah, it'll be my parents' 40th this year. It'll be their 40th anniversary
Wow.
this year. And their story, like, if you look at the beginning of their story, they should not have made it, because my parents have a star-crossed story. So my mom was a nurse in England. My dad was stationed in England. He got hurt playing football, American football. And he got to the hospital, and mom's friend came and found her. She was like, oh my gosh, you have to come see this American boy. He's so cute. He's a soldier. Like, you're going to love him. He looks like a young John Travolta. It's great. So they like hit it off, and they like hung out for a couple of months. But then my dad came back to the States, and my mom was in England, and they completely lost touch. And then the same girl got married to an airman, moved over to the United States. My mom went and visited her, and they went out to a party, and this guy was kind of like accosting my mom. My mom's 5'2", and like back then she was gorgeous. Like, she's gorgeous now, but she had the big 80s hair and all of that. And this guy out of nowhere comes up and like knocks this guy off of my mom, and then they turn around and it was my dad. And they hadn't seen each other for 2 years. and they spent every day together for 2 weeks. And my dad took her back to the airport and handed her a key and said, "I want you to move here. I don't want to lose you again. I think we should get married." And my mom flew home, told her very conservative parents that she was quitting her very good job as a nurse. She wasn't going to be able to be a nurse over in America. And she came right back, and they got together. And I was 6 months old when my dad got the call to be stationed overseas. And he was in Korea and the Philippines for a year and a half. So Mom moved back home to England with me, and we were there for a year and a half. They were separated for a year and a half in 1986.
Right after they got married.
Right after they got married. So they didn't have Facebook and FaceTime and cell phones, so they used to send cassette tapes to each other. So on one side, I know, the cutest, most 80s thing ever. So on one side, it would be just them having a one-sided conversation, and then the other side would be like songs that reminded them of each other and everything. We found like a couple of years ago. But when we look at that, look at all of that pressure that was on the very beginning of their relationship. My dad got hurt, and that's why he got sent back. And he was courted out of the Air Force by Delta, so we moved again. Like, we were living in Salt Lake City. My sister was born 3 months premature, so then they had that pressure on their marriage 3.5 years in. So now they have a preemie baby, and now they have another major move at 4.5 years. And it's just like these major, major events. And so when I look back on that, I'm like, statistically, you guys shouldn't have survived the first year. You shouldn't have survived the second year. You shouldn't have survived the 5th year. You shouldn't have survived the 7th year. Yet you did. And now they're at 40 years together. And it's one of these things where, like, when people ask me, like, why aren't you married? I'm like, well, look at the standard that I have to hit. Like, look at how well these two are matched and how much they complete each other. Like, that's an impossibly high standard. Both my sisters are married, and it's close. I'll give credit where credit's due to my brother-in-laws. They did a good job picking their boys, but they tick all the boxes for each other. And I think, like, with marriage especially...
Your parents or your...
My parents, like...
Okay. Tick all the boxes.
My sisters, like, they're young marriages, so they're still learning to tick all the boxes for each other. But my parents are best friends, and they have that partnership. And that's why I think they made it, is because they always put each other first. Like, my mom made sacrifices when my dad needed them. My dad made sacrifices when my mom needed them.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, that word.
Wonderful. Yes.
And when we were growing up, Dad was always the breadwinner. Mom was the stay-at-home mom. That there was always those distinct roles, but it was never unequal in our house. Like, when Mom was having a bad day, Dad stepped up. When Dad was having a bad day, Mom stepped up. And they do it to this day with each other. When Dad's having a bad day, Mom makes him his favorite dinner. When Mom's having a bad day, Dad takes her out to dinner. Dinner is always involved somehow in the process. But I do think it's very important that friendship, that underlying respect has to be there, because I can't see how any marriage will ever work. I don't think how any relationship will ever work without an underlying, level of trust and respect. I don't think friendships can't work if you don't have that. Relationships, dating relationships can't work. Even parent-child relationships need to have that trust and respect there. Otherwise, you're going to have major issues.
Exactly. In fact, with my daughter, I always told my daughter, honey, don't worry about all this mushy stuff and what you hear. All you ever do is marry your best friend. That's all you want. Don't care about anything else, but marry your best friend. In fact, she called me one evening. She says, Mom, I said, daughter, do you remember what you told me? I said, which time? And she says, about marriage. And I said, yeah. She says, we will. And we'll do that. That's okay. So they are now married. They're married 34 years.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And throughout the years, she would call and she said, "I'm ready to wring his neck."
Yeah.
And your job is to just shut up and listen, Mom. Okay.
That's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's hard not to look at him and want to wring his neck too once you hear all the stories, I'm sure.
Oh no, absolutely not.
No?
No.
Okay.
My reply is usually, "You want me to kick you in the butt, or shall he just do it for you?" So no, I'm the kind that says when she comes out of the turmoil and the struggle, and she's got these bruises in the ring, I'm like, "No, go back in, get back in there,
Yep.
And because
You're not done yet.
no, you're not. So, and she is an only child, and that's also another factor. And he happens to be the oldest child.
Oh, sure.
So she's got it good. Only spoiled brat, and a husband who takes on things. And he's like so cool. He doesn't know that about himself.
Yeah.
And she takes him for a ride sometimes, and I'm like, he's something.
So I'm curious, Pastor Carla, what do you think about two people from different faith backgrounds getting married? Do you think that can work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with counseling.
Yeah.
My bottom line is, and not counseling, almost in the context that we were just talking about, Kaylee, is having a third party who's going to be open, honest, and realistic, listen, and then give them ideas and alternatives on how can you face that. One thing about premarital counseling that I didn't go into, it's critical to me. It's old. It's called, there's two things. One is called Myers-Briggs, which is old. But I'm sorry, it works in this.
Yeah.
For you to understand where he is and him to understand where you're coming from. And there's another one called Enneagrams. I also use Enneagrams, which is
We did an
episode all
on
about personality
personalities.
tests.
Okay, so personality and understanding their own personality, because you have no clue what it is.
Yeah.
And the other thing is them learning about themselves and you learning how they respond to you.
Yep.
It's
That makes sense.
totally necessary.
So we have a final segment that we do on our podcast called Messy Christian Drama. So we go to Reddit and we pull, there's something on Reddit called AITA. Are you familiar with that? It's Am I the Asshole?
I barely know what Reddit is, so go ahead.
So it's Am I the Asshole? So this post comes from the Am I the Asshole subreddit, cross-posted to Am I the Devil? And the subject is, or the title is, AITA for asking my wife to change her last name. And I'm going to read this and then we'll talk about it. So me, 23, and my wife, 22, female, me 23 male, my wife 22 female, eloped earlier this year. We did it with just ourselves and didn't really have any of our family involved other than me asking her father to marry her and her sister officiating it. We did it fairly quickly after I proposed, and after taking a lot of heat and ridicule from my side of the family, I firmly stood by my wife, and they eventually welcomed her into the family after seeing how seriously I took my husband duties and that I choose my wife over everyone. I can't say that my wife did the same. She was scared to tell her dad we got married and thought he'd be disappointed, but like I told her, when we told him, he said congratulations, and he was very happy for us. I felt a little hurt that I was more than ready to face whatever with my side of the family to have her as my wife, but she didn't. But when I broached the subject of finally getting her last name changed, she refused. She said she just knew her grandparents would be very upset and disappointed in her, and then she told me she asked her father if she should tell her grandparents, and he said no. I was mainly upset with this because I felt like she let someone outside of our marriage dictate what we do in our marriage and sided with them over her husband, whom she vowed to always be by his side. Now, after I said I didn't feel comfortable with her keeping her maiden name until she was out of college, her family paid for her college, she was my wife and I wanted her to share my name. She told me it wasn't a big deal and she was going to do it after some time had passed. But now I find myself filled with discontent after I see her maiden name or hearing her tell me how proud she is to be my wife. I just can't help but not believe her, and I feel she's hiding me. She says I need to respect her wishes, but really they aren't hers, they're her family's. while mine are being thrown aside. Am I the asshole? Edit. So I guess I didn't give enough context. We're a very traditional and biblical couple. We keep God in the center of our marriage, and we keep to the biblical traditional, such as asking her father for permission. She says she wants to, and she hates it when I call her by her last name. We had agreed to change hers to mine before we got married. We also agreed to tell her family about our marriage at a party before I left for deployment. After talking with her father, he told her not to, and now she won't change it because she's scared for her family's feelings. I asked my wife about changing it just once, and after we talked and she told me she decided to wait, that was that. I haven't talked to her about it since because no matter what I stand by my wife and her decision to wait. The only reason I'm upset with her hiding our marriage from her family and going back on changing her name because of the opinion of her father over her husband.
There's a contradiction there because he said they were biblical and that they were traditional and asked the parents first, but he did not ask the parents first. So it sounds like maybe
messy. It's called messy Christian drama.
Backpedaling. Yeah. And maybe maybe he didn't hear what she was saying, or maybe she's making an excuse. But changing your name is so annoying.
It's so annoying.
It's so hard, and just
I still haven't done it.
And I don't think I will ever change my name again. Like, if I do get remarried, no.
I think, they said
my
that
hyphen is cosmetic.
Yeah.
It's not official. Anyway.
Right. It's, yeah.
I think they discussed it beforehand, and he says that they discussed it beforehand, and she said yes. First of all, this is a very young couple.
They're so young.
Military couple. Like, this
frontal lobe not solid yet.
Exactly. So, me, I'm sitting here being like, y'all are babies. Like, you barely have had this last name before you go changing it. For me, the last name thing for me is something that I would really struggle with because both my sisters took their husband's last name. I am the last Pointek. The Pointek line dies. Dies with me. Now there's my great uncle's side, but that doesn't count. So, and then I had Charlotte, so Charlotte has my last name. So technically I have already passed down the Pointek name, but I also passed it down to my daughter. So now that pressure will also fall on her about if she ever gets married, does she take her partner's last name or not, or hyphenate. I think because I'm so proud of my family and my last name, I would probably have to hyphenate, or I would just end up keeping it. I don't really see it as a huge deal these days. I think it's just something that people either just naturally do because it's the thing to do, but because it is such a hassle, I think a lot of people are just in company, they're like, yes, this is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but on all her official paperwork, it's probably still, Hamilton or something like that. So I don't see the huge deal. And it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that the wife has to have the husband's last name.
No, I imagine
it does say that you take one unto the other.
Oh no, that's not me.
And you cleave.
That's Carla.
What's about to say?
It does say that you leave your mother and father and cleave to your spouse.
Right.
That I don't know where the name comes in on that one.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, there's so much more to talk about with this. There's so many
I know,
avenues to go down. That's a big one with people who are really attached to their parents and don't want to leave their parents to have this new relationship, even though the Bible says to do that.
One post came out recently that they've learned that the relationships of the Neanderthals and the first people were mammalial. That means they married, a couple would marry, and they lived with her family.
Right.
And so what the Bible's saying is you leave your mother and father and you cleave to your spouse. So that's contradictory right there.
Yeah.
The other thing is, how old are they?
22 and 23.
Okay, 22 and 23. A woman's brain doesn't even start to solidify into maturity until at least the age of 22, and a man's not until after they're 25.
40.
I said start.
One of these things too, where it does sound like he's in the military. So there is a like to him for him. I think it's a matter of like pride. Like I want to have like this is my wife. I want her to have my last name. Like, but I'm like looking. I was a military bartender. I saw it a lot. And so for me, it was like one of these things where like if he gets deployed, he wants to leave his mark. So like this is Mrs. Smith. That is my wife. She's taken. And now you can tell because of the last name and the ring on her finger.
It sounds so controlling.
It really does.
Because you're being deployed and you have no control over what's happening there, but I can have control over this thing.
Yeah, so you have a controlled little boy. You have a controllable little boy with a little girl that's going to daddy, being like, "Daddy, fix this." Like, I don't want to have to tell him no. So like, I'm gonna blame you.
Right.
I'm almost curious, like, if he went to the dad directly and said, "Hey, I really want her to have my last name. What do you think?" I guarantee the dad would probably turn around and be like, "Yeah, that makes total sense." Because this sounds like she's turning around saying to her husband, "Well, daddy told me no," and he's not going to confront the dad about it, because I've done that multiple times.
But that bothers me that like the men decide what she's gonna do. Like she should be able to make that
Well, no, like
decision.
she's using the dad as her excuse, though.
Yeah,
So if he
agreed,
went to
but,
her
like,
directly and said, if he went to her dad directly and said, "She told me this, is it true?"
It feels like she should have agency.
Yes.
in this.
Declaring her independence, one, and I mentioned that I graduated from Agnes Scott, so, and feminism was a big thing when I was going to college, and to me, I hear, I need to know, I need to have my own identity, I need to keep my name, you know, even if it's fudge water, you know, I need to keep it.
But she doesn't really seem like she's standing up for herself, though. She's scapegoating it on her family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's not like she turned around saying like,
You're
"I want
right.
to keep my name. This is important to me that I keep my name."
Exactly.
She turned
She's
around. She
not.
goes, "It's gonna hurt my grandparents' feelings, and my dad, and my dad said to wait." Like, so she's not taking agency at all
You're
over
right.
her own life. She's scapegoating it because she's the one to take the responsibility, because she knows it's gonna hurt his feelings.
Passing the buck.
So I think both of them. I don't know if it's
But
so
I
much
feel
an
like-
a-hole thing
I
as
kind
much
of
as
think
it's
he
a
is,
like.
because I feel like there's a different conversation he could be having with her to say, do you want to keep your name?
Let's make
Right.
decisions
Instead
together.
of instead of do you want to change
Instead
your
of
name?
I said you change your name, so
or
why aren't you
even,
changing your name?
even just saying, do you want to change your name? Do you want to keep your name? Is a different conversation. You know? That she might feel like is a safer conversation for her to have if that's what she wants to do.
Babies. Just babies.
Yeah, babies. Anyway, all right. On that note, Pastor Carla, will you close us out in prayer for this marriage episode?
I'd love to.
All right.
Okay.
Lord be with you.
And
also with you.
Oh, gracious and loving God, you create us in your image, you put us into this world, and you say, figure it out. And then you send your spirit as these terrific women share the reality of motherhood and being the honest to goodness messiness of all that, and sort through it. May those that have ears and hearts to hear find a place and a space where you speak to them through this. Give them strength, give them direction, give them presence. Thank you for this opportunity. It's in your son's name we pray, and people of God said,
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Messy Christian Mamas. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, embrace the mess, share the love, and shine your light bright, my friends.